Let's go.
Let's go. Oh, no.
Do you want to?
Sorry. I'll let you.
Next one.
I'm excited and I feel relaxed and I'm ready to party. Don't say sorry. You don't need to do that. You don't need to apologize. It's a fucked up female habit. You don't need to be sorry for anything ever. Can you guess what every woman's worst nightmare is?
I don't have rage issues!
I have nothing to prove to you. When I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better.
I say when it comes to stardom and Lauren, there are no accidents.
Hi, Karen Peterson.
Welcome to Citizen Dame, the podcast where we love movies and we want other people to love them too, particularly the ones that we love. I'm Karen Peterson, joined by Lauren Humphries Brooks.
Hello. Yes, well, we are objectively correct about our taste in movies. That's part
We
of
are.
it.
I mean, that's just how it is.
Like our taste is objective. Everyone else's is subjective. Just like, oh, well, that's what you like, but you're wrong.
Yeah. I mean, occasionally people are right, but occasionally it happens once in a while. So, but mostly when they listen to us, that is when you are correct. Lauren, how are you?
I'm all right. I'm tired. The weather in New York has decided to go from like 55 degrees yesterday to like 30, and it was snowing a few minutes ago. And yeah, so I wish that I wanted to just decide. Like, if you want to be 50, fine. If you want to be 30, fine. Just choose. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. It's been rainy here. This week the rain kind of stopped, but there's another big storm coming in today that's supposed to last until Tuesday. So
Ooh.
yeah, so that'll be fun. And then I've been eagle eye watching the weather in Park City, Utah, because I am headed there this week for Sundance, and Karen don't dance with snow. I am not looking forward.
I have bad news for you about, I feel like you should know this already.
Well, okay, listen,
about Utah in January.
I lived there for 6 years. I spent 6 Januaries and it sucked. And every time I go to Sundance, I'm like, this is why I moved back to California. I wish that they would take Sundance back to July like it originally was, because July in Park City is quite pleasant.
I was going to say that makes better sense in a lot of, like, January in what is notoriously a snowy place.
Yes.
Just seems like a recipe for disaster.
The license plates say Ski Utah. So, I mean, yeah, it's known for skiing. When they were trying to get the Olympics in 2002, like their pitch to the IOC, all these countries that were trying to get the Olympics were doing videos about like cute kids and like, all this, come to our country, we're cool. And then for Utah, they just showed pictures of the snow-capped mountains and then they won. So, I mean, there was, we don't need to talk about the bribery scandal. I'm sure that was completely unrelated, but yeah, but that's the thing. So it's very snowy, but I think there are a couple reasons they moved it to January. One was that all the celebs really wanted an excuse for a ski weekend. It's really fun if you hang out like down at the bottom of Main Street. And there's a lodge there and like this whole area. And there's another area where there's some hotels, like the big nice hotels, where they do some of the interviews and stuff. And it's like there's this plaza and like some restaurants and things, and one of the ski lifts is right there, so you can just hang out there and see all kinds of celebs coming by in their ski gear and stuff. And yeah, it's fun to watch, but it's like freaking cold. And yeah, and I always stay down in Salt Lake with some friends, so I have to drive up and down the mountain every day to go back and forth. And yeah, there have been times where I've been terrified trying to get back down at midnight after a long day of screenings, and it's snowing and the roads are gross and they haven't plowed yet.
So difficult going to a world-renowned film festival,
right,
Karen.
Right.
Like, it's really hard. It's really hard, but which is all to say that you're going to Sundance this year, so that's really cool.
I am. It's their first fully back in person festival since the last time I went, which was 2020. So it's like they said, oh, Karen can come. Let's roll out the red carpet again. Let's do this. So but yeah, so it starts officially on Thursday. I am probably working through Thursday, so I won't get up there until Friday, but I'll be there the whole week. So I'm really, really excited. It's been fun, like getting all the press emails again of like, oh, come see this, come to this event. We're gonna give you swag if you come to this. Like, okay. I don't care about the swag. I just want to see the movies, but it's been really fun. And they are doing a hybrid, so there are a lot of people that will be watching from afar. I got a pass where I can watch things in person and online, so if there is a day where the weather's particularly bad and I'm not comfortable driving up the mountain, I can stay down in Salt Lake and watch some stuff there. So it's kind of a
nice.
best of both worlds type of situation. I'm really excited. So yeah,
That's nice. That's cool. Is there anything that you're like really looking forward to, or about the festival, in the festival?
Like as far as movies or just the festival
Just
itself?
just generally, but yeah, movies, anything that is like playing at Sundance, you're just like, ooh, I can't wait.
Yeah, so Nicole Holofcener has a new movie that's premiering there. It's called You Hurt My Feelings, and it's Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Right now I'm blanking on who plays her husband, but she plays a writer, and her husband's always been kind of her biggest champion, and then one day she overhears him telling a friend that he hasn't liked any of her work in years, and that of course is going to cause some problems in their relationship. So I love Nicole Holofcener, and so I'm really looking forward to that one. I think that sounds really good. Man, there's a bunch, and I'm totally blanking right now. I have a list somewhere.
I always feel like Sundance is one of those times where, you know, something premieres and something really catches on, and you're not always certain what it's going to be exactly.
Oh yeah.
Like you get those films that are from major directors or with big stars that don't do anything. And then others that are just like really catch on and become, you know, part of the awards conversation, all of that stuff.
It's so true.
Sundance is often the first stop for a lot of films.
Yeah, it's so true. There's like okay, so like The Farewell was one that it was getting some buzz ahead of time, but getting to see that at Sundance was so much fun, and people were so excited about it, you know. Then there's movies like Blindspotting, which Daveed Diggs was known at the time because of Hamilton, but he wasn't like the big movie star guy. And I mean, he's still kind of on the cusp on that, but he wasn't a big star. And Blindspotting was just this, you know, little movie about, you know, lots of different things, but racism is a big theme in that. And gentrification and lots of different themes, but it was just this kind of like little movie that it screened opening night, and suddenly that was the movie that everyone was talking about. And yeah, and then there was the movie last time I was there, Tesla, with Ethan Hawke, that people had been really anticipating, and then I saw it and I was just like, oh dear Lord, what is this?
And it did, I mean, that film did not do anything in terms of anything, because most people had the reaction that you did.
Exactly. Yeah, but then there's always these little surprises too. Like I saw one of the movies that's in our poll for possible bonus episodes, just on a whim, on a lark, I decided to go see this movie, Save Yourselves. Didn't know anything about it. I read the description in the booklet, you know, and I was like, oh, that sounds like it could be kind of funny. And I ended up just loving that movie. It's hilarious. And I was one of the only press, my friend and I went together, and we were like two of the only press people that showed up for the screening. And as soon as it was over, the rep comes over and starts asking me like, oh, what'd you think? You know, and all this stuff. And so then we like ended up corresponding and stuff. And I got quoted on the Blu-ray, you know, and I was in the marketing materials because I was one of the only people that saw it at Sundance. But it was like a really funny movie that I still love, you know. So yeah. So it's just, yeah, you really, the fun thing about Sundance is just giving things a shot. You never know what's going to
Mhm.
connect and what isn't. And yeah, like
Well, and
go ahead.
I was gonna say, in terms of our poll, like some of the films that, you know, I was going through different films that like had premiered at Sundance or were being shown or had been shown at Sundance, but you got things like Blood Simple, which is the Coen brothers' first film, right?
Yeah.
You know, you've got things like Heathers. So some of these films that are like kind of not just great films, but harbingers of like, you know, the direction that cinema is going to go, things like that. And you get those films that are small and are showing up at places like Sundance. So it's kind of it's one of those things you can't predict necessarily, which I think is quite exciting in film.
Yeah, it's so true. Well, and even Brick, the other movie that's on our list too.
Yeah.
That actually, so when I lived in Utah, we, you know, I love film. I've always loved film. And so there I was, and I didn't get to go to a lot of things because I didn't have money back then, you know. And so my friends and I would try to go to, you know, one or two screenings while it was in town. And the first year that we went, well, no, maybe not the very first year, I don't know, I think it was the first year that we went, we were walking on Main Street and we saw Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and we both knew him from Third Rock from the Sun, the TV show. And he was walking with Rian Johnson, but at the time I had no idea who Rian Johnson was. It was his first movie at Sundance, you know, and we did see it and it was great. We loved it. But it's just so funny because it was like it took years before that movie really it definitely was buzzed about a lot, and it helped put Rian Johnson on the map, but it took a long time before that movie really became something that everyone knew and recognized, you know. And it was one that started at Sundance, and yeah. So there's so many fun memories I have of Sundance. Oh my gosh, one time I had gotten tickets to a documentary, and I was with a friend and we were walking into the theater to watch this, and she asked me, what is this about? And I said, I'm not sure, insomnia or something. And so we go in and we sit down, and the director gets up to introduce his film, and he's talking about how one of the great things about being a documentary filmmaker is that nobody knows who you are, and so you have this anonymity when you're out in crowds. And so he starts talking about how he'd been standing at the door listening just to people as they were coming in, and he heard someone ask, what is this movie about? And the person next to her replied, I don't know, insomnia or something. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm totally getting called out. And he's trying to do this whole explanation about why the movie's really not about insomnia. And then I watched it and I was like, this movie's about insomnia, dude.
Just like, I was right, it is about insomnia.
Yep. Oh yeah, it was really funny. But anyway, yeah, so I don't know, there's definitely some like named movies that I'm looking forward to, but it's more of I'm really excited for the discoveries, you know, the ones that people aren't talking about yet, just to your point. That things that I might not even have noticed as any of the times that I've gone through the schedule, but I'll have an open spot and I'll say, I'll go take a look, and then it'll end up being something that I absolutely love and we'll talk about ceaselessly all year. So I'm excited to find out what that is.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. I'm certain you're gonna have fun.
Yeah, I will. It's gonna be great.
In the snow.
I know. But it's great, and it'll be fun to just reconnect with friends that I haven't seen in a long time, and just getting to go back to some of the old fun places and battle the shuttles, and yeah, it's great. I love Sundance. Maybe one of these days you'll get to go to.
Yeah, the amount of work it takes to get from one coast to the other is always the kind of thing that makes me go like, oh, and then it's January, and it's like, it's not great in New York in January, but it's even worse over there.
Yeah, Sundance is different though. You don't have to come all the way to the coast. You can just fly
True.
into Salt Lake. Salt Lake Airport's not bad.
True.
Mm-hmm. And then it's just a short ride up the mountain. So anyway, well, we saw a tweet last week that we were going to maybe talk about a little bit, but we ended up deciding this is a much longer conversation. So we decided to save it for this week. And so this is our theme this week is the movies that made us, which is also the title of podcasts and a show on Netflix and all kinds of things. But it's such a fun thing, I think, to talk about, especially here at the beginning of the year. Just this is still the time, I think, where we like to look back and be nostalgic in kind of in the depths of winter. So the tweet that inspired this is from @SidTheSunseeker, and it is, what is your movie? Like, what is the movie that changed your life and made you the person you are right now? I know we all have one. I'm curious what it is and why. Now, Sid, the Sunseeker, is a 19-year-old film student. So I feel like that is important information, because her entry was American Beauty. And she said, it sparked my passion for film, and nothing in life has ever been able to evoke the emotions I experienced when I watched it for the first time. It changed my whole outlook on life and how I viewed myself and the relationships in my life. And I love listening to people talk about what movies really kind of changed their lives in lots of different ways. It could be the movie that sparked your love of film. It could be the movie that took you in a particular direction, or just changed the way you view the world, you know? And so I love this topic. I'm excited to jump into it. Lauren put it out on Twitter just to see what some of our listeners had to say. And so we got some good entries. Noah said, when I was 7 or 8 years old, my family showed me Star Wars and Indiana Jones in back-to-back weekends. I was not allowed to watch movies rated above PG. Instead, they showed me TCM, and I saw Rear Window and The Maltese Falcon in the same weekend. I've been hooked since. I love that.
Initially I read that. I know he's talking about the network TCM, and initially I read it as Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I was just like, Jesus Christ, don't watch that when you're 7. What is wrong?
You're not allowed to watch movies above PG, but here, watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I was trying to think, it's just like, movies must have been rated at that point, and then I realized, like, he's talking about the Turner Classic Movies.
Yes.
Not Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So
yes, I love that.
Yeah.
Connor says, my dad started showing me all his favorites when I was around 12. Hit a lot of the greats, Casablanca, The Godfather, etc. But I felt like I started striking out on my own and really seeking new things after I saw The King's Speech in 2010. It really resonated with me, having dealt with some speech issues as a kid, and I am still a vociferous defender of that film. So am I. I will never stop cheering on that film. I love The King's Speech. I think it's a great movie, and I think that most people just are mad at what it beat and not at what the film itself actually is. And I will never stop saying that.
I feel like that film got kind of a bad reputation, not because of the quality of the film itself. Mm-hmm. That like, and I think that, you know, but I think that this is a really good point, that something can resonate with you because of your own experiences, right? So The King's Speech, which I like, I think it's a very good film and everything. It didn't necessarily resonate with me, but it didn't need to, right? Yeah. But it would resonate with Connor, because, you know, he has a life experience that is different from mine. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with like American Beauty, where I have a lot of problems with American Beauty. But it's still not, that doesn't mean that film doesn't mean something to people. And that even the problems that I have with it, are not like, you know, saying, oh, you're a bad person if you like this movie, or you're a bad person if this film was inspirational to you.
Right. Yeah. Well, and on that note, like with The King's Speech, I didn't have speech issues, so I don't have that reference that Connor does. But for me, that movie, and one of the reasons I love it so much, is because of the friendship. It's this core friendship between two people who wouldn't normally have ever met. And it just, I don't know, there's just something so beautiful about that friendship that just always stuck with me. And I particularly love Jeffrey Rush in that movie even more than
Yeah.
Colin Firth. And I think it's because he's this, he's this guy that's just going about his life and all of a sudden has this incredible experience that completely changes both of them forever. And it's the King of England, and he's not looked down on or anything for his circumstances, and that's one of the reasons why I love that movie. So yeah, so it's like the same movie can resonate with lots of different people for lots of different reasons too. So
Yeah, absolutely.
So Estefania said Caligari. The first time I watched it blew my mind. I was amazed at the things that they were capable of doing with a camera 100 years ago. And I started watching all the silent films I could get my hands on. I love that. Love that.
That's great. Yeah. Caligari is one of those, I think that particularly if you watch it, because it's one of those that's usually introduces like, here's what German Expressionism is.
Right.
It's Caligari. That's what it is. So just look at Caligari and that's it. But it is such, if you've never seen anything really like it before, it is such a shocking, in a lot of ways, very surprising film, because it doesn't show what I think we tend to associate with silent films, especially early on when we're first watching films. I think I don't know, maybe this was just my experience, but the first silent films that I ever saw were comedies. I saw like Chaplin and Keaton and those kinds of people. And I think that that's an easy way to kind of ease into silent film, because physical comedy is timeless, basically. Yeah. And you don't have the same, I think, experience of like the discombobulation of not having dialogue, not having ambient sound, all of that stuff that you do with like dramas or things like that. But Caligari is so visually arresting. Like, it's still a surprising film even now, and that's says so much about its staying power, really.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one that, like, I came to it much later. I didn't see that when I was young. I saw it, actually just in the last few years. And I think the first time that you see certain films like Caligari, where you are at in life can really influence how you see that film too. And if you have the opportunity to see something when you're young and then watch it at multiple times throughout your life, it can completely change meaning for you too.
Well, and with, I think the first time I saw Caligari was in college, right? And it was kind of, it was funny because the professor was actually like, okay, we're going to talk about German Expressionism, because it was like basically a film 101 class, right? And we're going to talk about German Expressionism, but rather than he talks like at length about Caligari, and then for some reason decided to show us Fritz Lang's M.
What?
Which is a great film, right? Yeah. But literally before the film is just like, well, this has expressionist elements. And I'm sitting there going like, why the fuck are we not watching Caligari, which you were just telling us about, and I really want to see now.
Yeah.
So, and I think, and Nanina might need to correct me on this, I think that Nanina and I actually got together because we were in the same class, and we're like, we need to watch Caligari. Let's go get it from the library, right? And and we got Caligari, and it's a fantastic film. But I was always very perplexed by that, just like, but you're literally saying that like Caligari in some arguments is the only German expressionist film, like totally expressionist. So why are we not watching the only expressionist film? Why are we watching the one with expressionist elements?
That's so
nothing against
weird.
Nothing against M. It is a great film. Still,
it's so weird.
It was very bizarre.
It's almost like when people in the film industry talk all about how great certain films by female directors are and then don't nominate them for stuff.
Yeah. No, it's true. I think that the reasoning, this was a class that I went to University of St. Andrews, and this was kind of the early days of film studies at St. Andrews. And I think that some of it was that the professors thought that, a bunch of freshmen and sophomores, primarily the people that were in the class, wouldn't want to watch a silent film. And my attitude to that is just like, look, if they're not interested in a particular style of filmmaking, then they shouldn't be in a film class. Like, you have
Right.
to experience these things. But I think that that was the idea behind it, that they were trying to make it more accessible or something. But I was just like, I really like M, but I would like to see this movie you were just talking about.
Yeah, it's so strange because it's like, I mean, we run into this all the time with people in the film Twitter community world, whatever we want to call it, that will talk about how they just love movies so much, but yet they won't watch certain films. Like, they refuse to watch genres or films from a certain time period, or I will never watch a film by this person, or whatever. And it's just like, okay, if you really are that interested in film, then watch them. Watch the ones that challenge you. Watch the ones that make you uncomfortable. Watch, don't just watch what you love. Watch the things that you don't love too. If you really love film, then that's all part of the experience.
Well, and so much of it is about prejudice. So the whole idea that, like, oh, you would have difficulty watching a silent film. It's like, yeah, silent films you have to adapt to, and to a certain degree, especially if you're used to watching more contemporary films.
Yeah.
But you don't know it until you try it. And also the whole idea of, like, oh, silent movies, that is an epoch of film. That is not like a genre particularly. There are all, like we're talking about, there are comedies, there are dramas, there are melodramas, there are different styles. There are some films that actually, incorporate the use of sound. But in very different ways because it's very early sound technology at that time. All of that stuff. And you can't know, oh, I don't like silent movies. Just like, how the fuck do you know? Obviously, right. Have you seen one and you decided that you couldn't get used to, like, the intertitles? Well, let's talk about The Last Laugh, which has almost no intertitles. That is almost entirely told visually. Yeah, exactly. How can you ever say that you love film and just decline to watch anything made in the 1910s or the 1920s?
Right. Yeah, exactly. On that note, too, I also think that every filmmaker working today needs to try making a silent film, because I watch, and the reason I say this is because I watch, so many movies. I saw almost 400 films last year. A lot of them were rewatches, but not all. In fact, not most of them. But there's just this tendency in a lot of up and coming filmmakers now where they just feel like they have to tell everything. And I want to see people actually explore what it's like to really focus on that visual medium that film is supposed to be, like, can they do it?
Yeah. And I mean, Alfred Hitchcock was a famous proponent of pure cinema, which is essentially silent movies, no sound.
Yeah.
So all of the storytelling is done visually. I think I've talked before about the opening scene of, after the credits, the opening scene of Rear Window, where we go through not Scotty, that's Vertigo, I can't remember his name now. We go through his entire backstory via things that are in his apartment. And so this before there's any dialogue, before there's anything, any conversation, anything like that, we get it. Here's everything that happened. And we get up to the car wreck, and we see him in the wheelchair with a broken leg. And we know what happened. We know who this guy is. Yeah. Within, a few minutes. And there is a story that Hitchcock was pressured by the studio to actually use a voiceover for that sequence, to, like, have Jimmy Stewart basically explain, here's what happened. And he resisted it, and thankfully they was not forced into it. But Hitchcock, who is probably one of the most seen filmmakers in the history of film, he is one of those that everybody sees, right?
Yeah.
Was a major proponent of exactly what you're talking about, visual storytelling. That's what cinema is supposed to be.
Yeah.
So tell what you can with the camera, not with, the dialogue explaining, here's how you should understand this.
Exactly. And I think that for filmmakers, for people who want to do that, who really are interested in film as a medium for their storytelling, I think that even if it's not anything that they ever show anybody, I think just for themselves, for the exercise, and maybe a lot of them do this and they don't know about it, but I just think that it's such a useful thing to do, to create visual stories without dialogue, because it's something that, like I said, I see so many films where I see that this is getting lost. People are telling us all these things that they need to tell us without just, when they could just show it, like,
Yeah.
I don't need to hear it, I need to see it. That's why I'm sitting here in this theater.
Yeah, why am I experiencing this visual medium if you're just going to explain everything to me? There are plenty of other mediums that the primary mode is words.
Right.
And even then, I have to say, I'm an editor. I tell people all the time, stop telling me what's happening. Show me what is happening. Literally make me visualize this.
Yeah, exactly. So Lauren, what is or maybe one or two films that you feel like, when you look back over your experience, what's a film that made you who you are today?
Well, since I was talking about Hitchcock, I'm going to start with the Hitchcock films, etc. Obviously, I like Hitchcock. That's something that not many people know about me. And I've seen all of his films that are available. There are a number that are lost. And I've been, very influenced by him. He was basically, as a director, he was the filmmaker that made me interested in film, made me understand that film is such a rich and complex and emotional medium. So if, anyone said, like, why did you study film? Why are you interested in film? Anything like that, just like, it's because of Hitchcock. With the acknowledgement that there are all kinds of issues surrounding his work, surrounding him as a person, all of those things. Like, he really was the thing that got me into film. And I have no idea what the first Hitchcock film was that I saw. I'm going to make the assumption that it was something like Rear Window, just because I feel like that's the kind of film that my parents would have been happy showing me. They would not have shown me Psycho, but Psycho, I think, was the one that I guess I want to say got me. And I was a bit older when I saw it. I had already seen a lot of Hitchcock films at that point. I'd seen things like Notorious and Suspicion and Rear Window, The Birds, all of those films. And Psycho was kind of the one that I was a little bit scared of. I was a little bit like, I want to see this, but I also don't want to see it. I knew the twists. I knew kind of the entire history of the film at that point. So I wasn't going in kind of blind about it, but I was very nervous about it. And it was one of those times, I remember watching it in the middle of the day, before we went to like a party at my dad's office. And I don't even know why I happen to be watching Psycho at this period. But it got me. It's got under my skin in a way that was very frightening, but also really exciting. It was one of those times where watching something, I still feel it every once in a while when I watch Psycho, which I've seen a million times now. It was one of those films that just felt so different and like nothing I have experienced before or since, and made me just like look at film in a way that was like, this is kind of almost the pinnacle of art, right? This is what film is capable of. And I absolutely loved it. And it terrified me. Like most people, I was just like, I don't want to take a shower. But at the same time, it was very, very exciting. It was like, this is fantastic. What he's accomplishing is amazing. But of course, it's, at that time, I wasn't, studying camera angles or anything like that. I've talked about this before. The shot that continues to stay with me is the shot looking over Marion's shoulder where the door to the bathroom opens and you just see this kind of black square basically, and you see Mother coming in, but it's very vague, this very kind of shadowy outline. And that is the moment in the film that just always terrifies me, that I always go back to. I love it.
Oh man. So I've probably mentioned this before, but at Universal Studios, they used to have this, it wasn't a ride. I guess it's more of a show, I guess. It's not there anymore, which I think is a shame, but they had sort of three, I mean, they probably would have needed to update it a little bit now, but they had sort of three like stages. So you go to one place and they did this whole thing, and then you like, and it was a visual effects show basically, and showing the use of green screens and stuff. And so one of them was Harry and the Hendersons, and that was for Foley, actually, if I remember correctly. It was like they were showing how you do the sound effects of this, like, you know, Sasquatch guy. And then they had one that was with Back to the Future, and then the last part of it was all Alfred Hitchcock. And they showed how he used green screen in some of his movies, but then they also showed the shower scene thing, and that was when I learned, oh, like, oh, it's the chocolate syrup, you know, and he switched the water to cold and stuff like that. Like I learned about all that from this Universal show. And so yeah, like you, I knew the big twist like many years before I ever was brave enough to watch the movie. And the reason I was too scared to watch it until I was probably a senior in high school was because my parents were terrified of that movie. Neither of them has actually ever seen it to this day. And I was just talking to my mom about this recently, and because I found out that they're doing a big screen, like a TCM is doing a screening of it later this year. And I was just like, Mom, we're going. And she was just like, I'm so scared. I've never seen it. And I was like, well, big screen. That's going to be the first time you see it then.
I mean, it actually, I don't know, because many years later, I actually got to go see another screening in a film class that was it was primarily freshmen. So it was, again, Film 101 classes. I was a grad student at the time, and afterwards there was a discussion of it, right? And or no, beforehand there was a discussion of it, and I was about to say something, and then I paused, and I was like, has anyone here seen this film? And it was like no one except for myself and my couple of friends, all of whom are grad students. And I was like, do you know what happens? Like, do you know the story? And they're like, no. And I was like, I'm going to shut up. I am not going to say anything.
That is so exciting.
The intake of breath when the twist is revealed, like, it was fantastic. It was the most exciting film screening I've ever been in, because I was just like, you don't know what's coming. This is great. I love that. I'm not going to spoil it for you. You are like,
that is awesome.
Enjoy this experience. Like I was shocked that anyone like didn't know the twist to Psycho, I guess.
Yeah.
It was just like this really wonderful moment. It was just like, oh wow, you guys are about to experience something truly great.
That is so cool. So cool. So for me, your foundational director is Hitchcock. My foundational director, like any child who grew up in the 80s, is Steven Spielberg. And officially the very first movie I ever saw in a movie theater was not directed by Spielberg. It was directed by George Lucas, and it was Star Wars, but I was only 6 months old and I do not remember it, shockingly. One of the earliest movies I do remember seeing in the theater, and I've been thinking about this a lot ever since I saw The Fabelmans recently, and that is Raiders of the Lost Ark. And the reason I've been thinking about it, they're not connected. The Fabelmans and the scene in The Fabelmans specifically that I'm about to reference, and Raiders of the Lost Ark are not connected, but in The Fabelmans, early on, when little Sammy Fabelman is still very young, his parents take him to see, I think it's supposed to be his very first movie, and it's The Greatest Show on Earth. And there's a scene in that film where the train derails, and it's this huge like special effects, visual effects feat. And Sammy is terrified of it, but it also fascinates him. And so he spends just hours and hours and hours recreating this at home. And this is kind of where he starts to develop his love for film. And I've been thinking about I was very lukewarm on The Fabelmans, as much as I love Spielberg. I appreciated the movie, but I don't love it. Like a lot of people seemed to absolutely just be head over heels for it. And that's great for them. I'm happy for them. But I've really been thinking a lot about how for Sammy and, for Steven, it was this train wreck in The Greatest Show on Earth. For me, one of the things that really just completely fascinated me about movies is the boulder scene in the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it seems like a small thing, but when I was, 4 years old or so, and I saw that for the first time, it was scary, but it was also fascinating. Like I had, and I saw that movie many, many times in my childhood. It was on regular rotation at our house. We had a VHS copy of it. And it was one that I was fascinated by it. I would think about it. I would talk about it. I would, my brother and I would like play it out, in the backyard. And it was this, like, it really just captured my imagination. And eventually a couple of years later, they did the Making of Raiders of the Lost Ark thing on TV. And I was just so just like caught up in watching how they did that scene. And it's so funny because like as an adult, I think, oh, well, it's really not that momentous of a thing. But for me as a little kid, it just really affected me in a way that made me excited, not frightened. It really made me excited about movies and what was possible with movies. And that's just something that always resonated with me, and that kind of reawakened, I guess, that memory when I was watching this movie just a couple months ago.
It is such an iconic scene. And I like, yeah, I didn't experience it in the way that you did the first time, but that is a film generally that really gets at, I get the magic of the movies, as it were, like just that real excitement and energy that comes from just a really well constructed action sequence, which is all that it is, really, but and seeing that kind of thing for the first time when you're a child is just like, oh wow, you can do that, like, oh my god.
Yeah And it's like from a very young age, it just made me really excited about what was possible, and even though I did not understand a lot of that story, I still just got so excited about it. Like,
you mean you were not versed in like the story of the Ark of the Covenant and Nazis and like all of that at the age of like 4?
Surprisingly, no. It took me until like age 6 to understand that Nazis existed and were bad. But
it's funny. I don't remember how old I was when I first saw Raiders of the Lost Ark, but I do remember the experience because it was at a KOA campground. And my parents and I must have been fairly young, because we would, for a couple of summers, we drove from like New York to the Southwest. And we would camp along the way. And I remember at a KOA campground, they were showing as like an outdoor screening Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, fun.
And my parents, in their infinite wisdom, were like, oh, Lauren would love this. Like, of course she would. Indiana Jones, who doesn't love Indiana Jones? She'd absolutely love this. I was fine until the face melting.
Yeah.
At which point I had a complete breakdown. And I remember screaming and crying and my mom having to walk me away. And there was nothing that was going to be consoling, including the fact that it's just like, well, they're bad guys. These are like Nazi, just like, I did not care. I was just like, this is the worst thing I have ever seen in my life. And I still have this very visceral memory of the face melting. It's just like, I remember that. I will never not, that is just a part of my memory forever.
Oh man. Yeah. I used to not be able to watch that. It took a while before I could actually just sit and watch that scene and not freak out as well. So funny. So what's another one for you?
Another one for me, I think I've said this numerous times before, but I grew up with without cable for the most part, sometimes with cable, but for the most part without cable. But it meant that my parents would very often like rent movies. We would get things from the college library. So they kind of tried to introduce me to different kinds of films. And one of the ones that they were quite right in assuming that I would like was the Marx Brothers. And so the film Marx Brothers: A Night at the Opera remains, I think, one of my favorite comedies, and also one again that I think because of its comedy potential, and because one of the things I really loved about it, I've always loved Groucho. And it's funny because most of the time when you're a little kid, you love Harpo, right? Because Harpo is very childish. It's all like physical slapstick comedy, etc. Groucho is much more cerebral. And it's a lot of it is about, what is being said and things like that. But one of the things that I loved about A Night at the Opera was the way that things sounded. And it's difficult to describe because a lot of the time I didn't understand it. But the way that Groucho and Chico would say things, I knew was funny, even though I didn't necessarily understand what they were saying. So the entire scene, if you've seen A Night at the Opera, there's an entire scene where they go through a contract, right? They sign a contract. And throughout it's the party of the first part, and they like keep on tearing off strips of the contract as they disagree about what they're going to accept in the contract. And by the end of it, they each have this little strip of paper that is just like a signature. And that's all it is. And it's a hilarious scene. I did not know what a contract was when I first saw it. I did not completely understand what was going on, but I found it funny. And I think A Night at the Opera is probably one of the Marx Brothers' greatest films. I think that's generally acknowledged. Because you've got these guys who are quite obviously, working class, who are sort of infiltrating the upper classes. And at one point stick, take me out to the ball game in the middle of an opera, and begin playing baseball and throwing peanuts into the audience. You've got this kind of wonderful anarchic mockery of the upper classes and of pretension also, not just wealth, but pretension. And this embracing of kind of the more working class anarchic humor and joy and everything. And it's still one of my favorite films.
Nice. I know I've seen it, but I don't have a lot of memories of it. So I think it was one of those that I saw once a long time ago. I should revisit it.
You should. It's probably one of the most plot driven of the Marx Brothers films. It balances out the comedy. A lot of their earlier films are quite obviously adapted from the stage. And the whole point of them is, for the Marx Brothers to do skits, basically. But A Night at the Opera actually feels much more integrated and everything. There's a plot. There are other characters that are important characters. It's just wonderful. It's just wonderfully funny.
Nice. So it's interesting. A movie that ever since this tweet came up, like one of the first movies that popped into my head is actually one that I haven't thought about, like specifically directly thought about in a long time, but ever since I've been thinking about this, it hasn't left my brain. So I was just like, oh, I think this is a movie that I really should probably talk about. And that is from 1988. It's a film called Stand and Deliver, which is a movie that I think needs a second life. I think that it needs to be talked about more. It's Edward James Olmos plays a teacher, Jaime Escalante, who is a real person. This is based on a true story. My dad took me to see this when I was 11 years old, and it was this teacher teaching a high school. He gets a job at this Garfield High School in East Los Angeles, and the scores at the school, reading and math, were just like really, really low, really bad. And there's a push to, introduce more remedial education. And this teacher is just like, no, we're going to teach them calculus. We're going to push them. We're not going to, talk down to them. We're going to tell them, we're going to show them they can come up to this level. And he ended up building a program that was just unbelievable. He got all kinds of national attention for what he did. And, he had students that didn't think that they could go anywhere in life end up, going to Caltech and USC and all these big schools, and like the students that were passing the AP calculus exam from his classes, it was so successful that the AP board were just like, I think there's cheating going on. We're gonna double check on this. And so there was like some investigation and stuff, and it was, he just was that effective of a teacher. And obviously we've seen other films like this, Dangerous Liaisons, or no, sorry, Dangerous Minds, different movies.
It's like, wait a minute.
Dangerous Minds, Michelle Pfeiffer. We've seen other movies that are like this, but there's just something about Stand and Deliver specifically that I think it's because it was this unassuming, immigrant from Bolivia who comes in and is just like, I'm not going to talk down to these kids. I'm going to talk to them on the level that they should be at. And it was just this one guy who made a huge difference. And there was just something, like, there was just a lot of things about that film that resonated with me. I mean, I remember watching it when I was 11, and like none of the other kids in my class could have cared less about this movie. And I come back on Monday and I'm like, oh, this is so good. And math, yay. And they were like, you are weird. But it really was a film that I think what really affected me was the fact that this was a real person that was still currently teaching at the time that this movie came out. He stayed at that school for another few years afterwards. And I think that there was just something about that like, this wasn't about a love of movies for me. This was a film that just really taught me that, really one person can make a difference, and it doesn't have to be a huge difference. It's a huge difference to that 1 or 2 or 12 or 50 people, and anybody can change someone's life if they just believe in them and help them along the way. And I think Edward James Olmos in that film is so good. Lou Diamond Phillips is in it. He's really good. Just I don't know, that was just one that really has stuck with me for years, that again, I think doesn't get talked about enough, and I don't think enough people have seen it, and it needs to be kind of revisited.
It seems like one of those films that, yeah, like you said, it's just not, it hasn't survived in the same way.
Yeah.
Or something. Honestly, I haven't seen it. It's one
that doesn't actually surprise me that much.
It's funny because it's one that I know of, and like I'm aware of a lot of the imagery, I'm aware of the story and things like that, but I haven't actually seen the film. And honestly, I just was like, I think it's because of South Park, because there's an episode of South Park that references the film pretty explicitly. And yeah. But funny. Yeah, I've never seen the film. It's interesting, but it's interesting, those kinds of films that stick with us for whatever reason, Yeah.
And I think, honestly, part of it too was that, because like my dad took us to, we were a family that went to the movies. I actually saw Raiders of the Lost Ark at a drive-in, like we would do that every weekend. We would just go to the movies. And I have lots of memories of going to different movies with each of my parents, with both of them together. This one, I think part of what was such a I don't know, like, just part of what made this such a memorable thing for me was that this was one of the few times I remember it just being my dad and I. And my dad really wanted to take me to see this. And like, so the two of us went. My brother didn't go. It was just me and my dad. And it was just a special experience for the two of us to have together as well. And then it was just this movie that really hit me, even at such a young age, and so I think part of it is the circumstances and part of it is the film.
Oh yeah, definitely. That those memories of experiencing, like I say, remembering seeing Raiders of the Lost Ark in a KOA campground or something like that, going with your family to see a specific film that had meaningfulness beyond the film itself.
Yeah, exactly. So what's another one for you?
I was trying to think about this, and there are a lot of them. One that just going off of this whole idea of the experience itself. I was a little bit older when my parents and I did this, but there's a local theater that is now I don't think ever shows films anymore. But back in the day, it used to have like summer film programs, basically. And at one point, my parents decided that they really wanted to go because they were showing a double feature of The Maltese Falcon and The Thin Man.
Oh, wow.
And I had seen The Maltese Falcon before. I'd never seen The Thin Man. I don't think any of us had seen The Thin Man at that point. And this was like an old school movie palace, basically. And it was a massive screen, and we even were like, oh, we'll go see The Maltese Falcon, which was the first feature, but maybe we'll leave after that. And then we wound up staying, and so I got to see on the big screen The Maltese Falcon and The Thin Man, and it was one of those times, I think there are a lot of different debates about the theatrical experience. If that could be the theatrical experience again, then I think that there would be a justification for it.
Yeah.
Because like this, first of all, great films, right? Beautifully projected in this gorgeous old theater. And again, the first time I'd seen The Maltese Falcon on the big screen, first time I'd ever seen The Thin Man. And it was a very unique and novel experience, not one, that I'm likely ever to be able to repeat. But it was a marvelous just sort of moment. And it was less about seeing the films themselves and more about all of the ambiance, everything that was around watching those two films.
That's so neat. Yeah. I don't remember having an experience with seeing a classic film on a big screen when I was younger. I've definitely taken opportunities to do that in recent years. Especially now that like Fathom Events teams up with TCM and they do big screen classics. And that's why I just saw The Godfather for the first time a couple of years ago. And it wasn't that I avoided it or anything. It just kind of had never happened. And then there was this TCM Fathom Events screening of The Godfather. And so the first time I saw The Godfather was on a big screen, and it was an incredible experience, and then I don't think it was last Halloween. I think it was Halloween 2021. AMC was doing a series of the Universal Monster movies, and they did Frankenstein and Dracula, and it was on a Saturday morning. And I went to see it. So it was this double feature, and I was really surprised at how full the theater was at like 10 a.m. on a Saturday. These two movies from 1931. Yeah, that's right. It was 2021 is when it was, because it was like this 90th anniversary thing. And
oh yeah, I think I remember you talking about this, that you were going to see it.
Yeah. And it was so cool seeing like parents bring their young kids to this too. And the kids were into it. They were so excited. And it was just such a fun experience to have that. And I'd seen both movies before. It wasn't like I didn't know them or hadn't seen them a million times, but I had never seen either of them big and up on the screen with that sound system and everything, and in a full theater full of people. And yeah, just what you're talking about, the way you're describing that experience, there really is nothing like, and I will defend home video and streaming endlessly, but as someone who absolutely loves movies and always has and grew up in movie theaters practically, I will always prefer the theatrical experience when it is one where the audience is paying attention, people aren't being distracting, and the projection is good and the sound is good and the seats are not, making you want to die. I will always defend that experience, but unfortunately, too much of the time now, theaters, you go in and it's not like that. There's people on their phones, there's people, coming in and out, and there's lots of distractions. And
well, and I think that's why, like, in many ways, I feel stronger about repertory theaters than I do about, the big cineplexes, et cetera, because you're more likely to get audiences. So one of the last films I saw in a movie theater before the pandemic happened was I got to see The Lady Vanishes on the big screen at Film Forum
Awesome.
in Manhattan. And that was great. And actually, one of my friends came with me, and it was her first time seeing the film at all. It was a fantastic experience. but part of that was because everyone in the audience wanted to be there, right? Everyone had decided that I'm going to pay, $15 to go see a 1938 Alfred Hitchcock film.
Yeah.
There's a purpose behind it, and I think that we get that less and less in some of the bigger cineplexes. And so you get audiences that like are almost there just because, just like, well, I was supposed to go see a movie, or they're there to be, social, to talk, to be on cell phones and things like that. And so you don't have the same experience.
Yeah.
Although I will say, seeing Cats on the big screen, again, one of the last films I saw in the theater before the pandemic was definitely, that was an experience, and I'm so glad that it was with a big audience because everyone was into it in like the best possible way. I've never heard people laugh and just have nervous collapses in the movie theater at a film before, but it was a great cinematic experience.
Honestly, I think that I probably wouldn't have finished that movie if I'd just been watching it at home. But because I was watching it in a theater full of people and enjoying the crowd, that's where
no, that's like a midnight screening movie, honestly. That's like a movie where you go specifically to shout things and to like break out in inappropriate laughter and stuff like that. And that's that kind of theatrical experience I think is fantastic. I did feel bad, actually. I was like, I really hope that no one was here because they love the musical Cats. Because that would not have been a very pleasant experience.
No, it would not. So okay, so as we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, obviously there are certain things that hit us at different points in our life, and there's also different movies that hit us at different points in our life, or like, newer releases come out, and that can also have a really profound impact on us. So is there anything that maybe has come out in the last few years, or something that you just saw for the first time in the last few years that you feel like really changed your thinking, or something like that? Like, is there a newer movie or a new discovery for you?
Not necessarily that. Well, we've talked a lot about getting to discover female directors, particularly earlier female directors. But in terms of films that have been released in the past few years, I think that this might be like just kind of a different way of looking at things. Both the combination for me, actually, of the release of Power of the Dog last year and I think it was last year.
Yeah, it was.
And
2021
and Tar this year. Those two, I think, have kind of reinvigorated an interest in more contemporary cinema. I watch a lot of older films. Those are the primary films that I go for. But both of those films, I think, were, I said this when Power of the Dog came out. It was the first time in a long time that I felt truly compelled by a contemporary film. And it's funny because everybody talks about, oh, Power of the Dog is so slow. Tar is so slow. It's just like, yeah, but it's compelling. And there's been something. I'm actually excited about the direction that a lot of film has been going, despite all of the bumps and all of the problems that you have with distribution, everything. There's been a lot of really good cinema that has come out in the past few years, and that is particularly like pointed us in, I think, an interesting direction. I'll be interested to see how those things develop. So that combination, I guess, has kind of made me think that there is still a place for these kinds of films, and that there's still something very meaningful to be said with cinema.
Yeah, I love that. Two for me are movies that we have talked about extensively on the show because we love them so much, and they kind of identify us as people. But they're two films that really taught me when I have an opinion, it's okay to have that opinion and to dig in and to defend it, even when men are being dumb. And those are Ghostbusters 2016 and Birds of Prey. like
Absolutely.
they're
Yep.
great movies. They're both really, really great movies, but just what they did, the experience of those, especially with Ghostbusters, because I was a couple of years into my work at award circuit. I had been there about 3 years, I think, when that movie came out, but I was really starting to get more involved and more active. I was on the podcast at that point, and that was a movie that I had to defend so much. And it's interesting seeing the way the conversation has turned on that one, so that it's like all of a sudden people realize it's actually pretty good. It's just not as good as those other ones, but like people forget how mean and hateful they were about it when it came out. And I think it just that experience of that movie being released and then falling in love with it. I absolutely loved it from the beginning. And then having to defend it so much, I think it just taught me a lot as a writer and as a film critic. It taught me a lot about how to articulate an argument in defense of my opinions. Not even necessarily about that movie, but just how to really defend my opinion and how to critique a film through my own experience, through my own lens, but also in a way that really makes sense. And yeah, so I think that just as to where I am now in my career as a writer, I think that film did a lot for me, honestly. And then Birds of Prey.
Wow, that yeah, no, that's a really good point. I mean, we've talked so much about those movies in one way or another, but yeah, I think that I think generally for a lot of people across the past 6 years or so, there's been a lot of radicalization, but particularly for women, like the rise of the this new feminist movement, wherever we're calling it at this point, the Me Too movement, I guess, in a lot of ways. But there's more to it than that as well. It stretches beyond the initial campaign of Me Too, but all of that, yeah, like those films. And I think in some ways, like especially the outpouring of hate for Ghostbusters really did solidify how women and women's concerns are sidelined in film criticism, right? Not necessarily in Hollywood, and I've been talking about that, but in film criticism and in the insistence on consensus of opinion.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we should forget, I think a lot of people have, that a lot of the backlash against Ghostbusters was driven by people like Milo Yiannopoulos and the Gamergate people. Like that, there was a cohesive effort to go after that film, and to specifically go after people like Leslie Jones. So it stretches beyond like, oh, I just didn't like it. It's just like, no, there's almost a political statement in watching that film and praising that film.
Yeah. Well, and it was one that started even before the movie was finished. I mean,
yeah,
as soon as they announced the cast and that it was going to be all girls, that it was not going to be, because there had been a lot of people wanting and asking for a third Ghostbusters movie for years, and there had been one that was supposed to be like I know we've talked about this. There was one that was supposed to be like Megan Fox was going to be in it, and some other people, or at least that was the conversation. And it was supposed to be like the Ghostbusters were retiring and handing over the business to these girls, and people were fine with that when the girls were going to be like hot and young. As soon as it turned out that the girls were going to be actually, scientists and normal women, then it suddenly was, this is ruining my childhood. And that started really early on. Like as soon as the cast was announced, people were railing against it and were mad and were determined to hate that movie. And I was skeptical of it. I loved Bridesmaids, but could Paul Feig do it again? And this was the movie that made me say, I will never doubt Paul Feig ever. And I have not been disappointed by him yet. And even a couple of years ago, I was with my nephew. I think he was 13 at the time. And we were just hanging out and we were looking for a movie to watch. And I was like, oh, Ghostbusters is on. He goes, oh, yeah, let's watch it. And I said, have you seen this before? He goes, yeah, I like this one so much better than the old one. And I was just like, oh, there's hope for the next generation. And yeah, sorry, go on.
Well, I was going to say, I went to see Ghostbusters a couple of times in the movie theater, and I remember the people who were actually going to see the movie were like, kids and teenagers and people my age, and like there was pretty much a spread. Everyone had a good time. Like, there were 12-year-old boys in the movie theater who are obviously having a great time with it. So I think that it was definitely one of the first films of kind of this cycle, I guess, of like Trumpism and MAGA and all of that shit, that really catalyzed something both in terms of the reactionary elements, but also in terms of kind of the burgeoning of this feminist movement.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was intentional, particularly on the part of the film, but like I say, at this point, there's a political statement being made in watching that film and in praising that film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. And it's interesting. I think it specifically is because of the fact that it ties into something that was foundational for a lot of people, especially those of us who grew up in the 80s. We grew up on Ghostbusters, the 1984 film. And so I think that because nobody seemed to have the same reaction to Bridesmaids. They were, it wasn't as loved as, like, I don't know, The Hangover or whatever, but people weren't mad about it because it didn't tie into something that they loved. Spy was really popular because that was, people like Melissa McCarthy. It was a funny spy movie, but it wasn't like a female version of James Bond. It was something else. And I think with Ghostbusters, that became where people decided to say, like, I'm being personally attacked by this movie, even though they weren't.
Well, and I even remember like some men and even some women saying like, well, but this is like this is like women invading my space.
Yeah.
Right. This is women invading the space, the geek space. Right. And it's just like, did you ever consider that maybe women were there the entire time? Yeah. And you just didn't want to see us and you didn't want to acknowledge us and you kept on kind of locking us out. And now there's something that is quite literally letting us in. And yeah, I mean, I have to say, seeing Holtzman kick ass in that movie was like a moment for me where like the little 8-year-old girl that I was who wanted to be a Ghostbuster, and was told by boys that I couldn't be, even at the age of whatever I was, 30 at that point, right? I was like, oh, that little 8-year-old girl feels very vindicated right now.
Yeah.
Feels very emotional at this moment because this is actually meaningful. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, those are the ones that recently kind of changed things for me.
That is a very good point.
Well, do you have any other final thoughts as we kind of wrap things up this week?
Not really. I mean, obviously watch more movies as always. And I think like we said it earlier, kind of, I think that all of the films that we're talking about are kind of launching pads at some level, but I find it interesting that most of the ones we're talking about, we still love, like, maybe not in quite the same way, but like, I don't think you can ever fully recapture that initial experience, but you also don't need to. Because it kind of pushes you further. It leads you into finding new films, finding films that give you a similar experience and that can like move you in ways that you maybe didn't necessarily expect, including going to see the movies that maybe you're not certain about, the ones that are outside of your wheelhouse, the ones that you're a little scared to see. That's important as well. Yeah.
I think it's really, especially for those of us who are going to say that we love movies, we, like what we were talking about at the beginning, we need to challenge ourselves. We need to take those risks, go see things that, go see things by film directors that we wouldn't necessarily seek out. Go have those experiences, watch genres you don't normally think that you like, I've had so many different experiences with friends who will say, oh, I don't like horror, or I don't like, martial arts or whatever. And or even, a few years ago, I had a friend who was just like, I don't like watching old movies. I don't connect with them. There's just something about them that I don't like. And I said, I knew a lot about this, and well, not a lot. I knew enough about this friend's personality that I said, have you seen The Apartment? And he said, no. And he watched The Apartment and he came back and he was just like, wow, that was really, really a great film. And he loved it. And I was just like, this is the thing. There's something for everyone in every genre, in every time period. You just have to find what works for you. And I don't know how much he took that and went and experienced other old films, but I know that it did open up some, some new films that he was willing to watch after that, which, it's just try things. It's okay. It's at most 18 hours of your life. Some movies feel like they're 18 hours long. That's why I said that.
True.
Anyway, all right. Well, I guess that will wrap things up for us for this week. We're not going to have new episodes for the next 2 weeks because I will be in Sundance, but we are going to have a bonus episode coming up. So you'll be able to listen to that. We're still, as of right now, not sure what it's going to be, but it's looking pretty close. So that'll be fun. What were you going to say? Something?
No, I was going to say I think I know what it's going to be, but unless things have really changed in the past hour,
probably, yeah. But we'll find out. So it'll be fun. Anyway, so we just want to thank you all for listening. We especially would like to thank our patrons for helping keep the show going. You can hear all about them. No, why did I say that? That was weird.
Hear all about our patrons. Okay.
You can't hear anything about our patrons except for their names, which are
sometimes you get lost in the patter. Sometimes it's just like, wait a minute, what was I saying?
I'm just saying words at this point. Like, I don't know, nothing makes sense. But our patrons are Ali, Brian, Connor, Estefania, Heather, James, Kathleen, Carriotta, Matt, Michelle, Monty, Nanina, Robert, Steve, Sharon, Tao, and Will. Thank you all so much for supporting us. If you would like to learn more about how you can become a patron yourself, this is what I was trying to say, and I said like 3 things at the same time, and it was very awkward. But if you'd like to be a patron too, you can go to patreon.com/citizendame and sign up. And membership or subscriptions, whatever, I don't know, gets you early access to episodes. We have some fun little things like stickers and buttons and bonus episodes and stuff like that. So it's lots of fun, but it really, the important thing is that you get to help keep the show going, because it does cost a lot to host this, and not like hosting the episodes, but like actually putting them on the internet costs money. So yeah, so we appreciate the support of people that help us do that. We also have our Zazzle store, zazzle.com/citizendamepod, and our Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/citizendame. There's also a donate button directly on the website if you wanted to just toss some money in there as well. And the website is citizendamepod.com. There are some reviews. My Women Talking review is coming. I've been working on it for a long time, but it's coming. It'll be there by the time you're even listening to this. So what I really mean is it's there. Go look at it. But I'm also going to be writing lots of reviews out of Sundance. So be checking back for that. So I'm going to, everything I see, I'm going to try to write up. So we'll see how that goes. But anyway, you can contact us in lots of different ways. We have our email, citizendamepod@gmail.com. And of course, we're on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Mastodon, Citizen Dame Pod. Letterboxd is at Citizen Dame. We are officially a Letterboxd HQ. So we're going to have lots of fun stuff happening over on our Letterboxd account. So you definitely don't want to miss that. Go give us a follow over there. You can also find us individually. Lauren, where are you?
I am on all of the socials at LH Business.
And I am on all of the socials at Karen M. Peterson. So that is it. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Bye.
Hello, Marion.
Indiana Jones. Always knew someday you'd come walking back through my door. I never doubted that. Something made it inevitable. So what are you doing here in Nepal?
I need one of the pieces your father collected.
I learned to hate you in the last 10 years.
I never meant to hurt you.
I was a child. I was in love. It was wrong and you knew it.
You knew what you were doing.
Now I do. This is my place. Get out! Mohan, Temiguru, Bulianu.
I did what I did. You don't have to be happy about it, but maybe we can help each other out now. I need one of the pieces your father collected. Bronze piece about this size with a hole in it off center with a crystal. You know the one I mean?
Yeah, I know it.
Where's Abner? Where's Abner?
Abner's dead.
Marion, I'm sorry.
Do you know what you did to me to my life?
I can only say I'm sorry so many times.
Well, say it again anyway.
Sorry.